In general, I think it's a good idea to explain your reason for doing something when you're communicating with someone. For example, if you can't come to an event that's really important for someone, it's a good idea to explain why you can't, so that it gives the message that, I wish I could. It's not about you. Or if you're trying to convince someone to do things a certain way, like trying to convince your kid to eat vegetables, you gotta explain why it's good for them to eat vegetables. They need to actually understand it if you want them to do what you're asking of them. When people understand your reason for something, they're more likely to see where you're coming from and to want to cooperate. But unfortunately, there are some people out there who will not listen to you no matter how much you try to explain yourself. And that's essentially what this video is about. Discerning when someone is straight up not listening to you and why you need to stop explaining yourself to those people. For the most part, I think people want to understand each other. But there are certain situations where people are actually incentivized to ignore what you're saying. And there are also people who are incapable of hearing what they don't want to hear. So in personal relationships, for example, people who are overly defended, who use a lot of defense mechanisms, particularly less adaptive defense mechanisms, physically don't have the capacity to truly hear and process what you're saying to them. If what you're saying to them is threatening to their sense of self, their defense mechanisms are going to reject that. It's not even going to make it through into their mind. Like if you're setting a boundary with a family member and they just keep trying to poke holes in your explanation, keep making you try to justify yourself, they're not truly hearing what you're saying, which is, hey, this no longer works for me. Or if you're explaining to someone why you've decided to end the relationship, a lot of people who are incapable of hearing that will then go tell other people, oh my God, I have no idea why this person went no contact. Or if you're giving someone feedback that they don't want to hear, maybe they have a really fragile sense of self, they might not even acknowledge what you said, let alone truly understand that they did something hurtful. They might just change the subject into a different direction every time you bring it back to the topic at hand. In work settings too, this can show up a lot. And in work situations, it's usually not that people don't have the capacity to truly hear you, it's that they're incentivized not to, either because it's in their interest or the company's best interest to completely ignore what you're saying. For example, take a look at this video where Amazon employees are really avoiding answering a question directly.
If Amazon's such a great place to work, as you've said, that's what you hear time and time again from your team, why have your team in Coventry gone on strike so much?
I think it's important to note that we absolutely support their right to do that.
That hasn't answered the... Excuse me, I've obviously we've sat here for quite a while now. I feel like I might need to get lessons from you both at some point in how to not answer the question that was asked directly. If you're that good an employer that you've explained to us so far, why have your workers in Coventry gone on strike so much?
I think they're executing their rights as we absolutely would protect their ability to do. I've shared some data around that building about how employees are telling us it's a great place to work. What I would love to do is invite you, sir, to come and see the building yourself.
I really apologise for interrupting you. My question was why. You haven't answered why. You've told me that, again, it's a great place to work and you've got all this data and I'd love to come and see what you do. Yes, but why? That's the one thing you haven't answered yet, which is the question I actually asked you. Why?
I think that's a good moment for me to, again, extend the invitation.
But it's a good moment for you to not... No, sorry, really sorry. I'm going to really push this point.
Okay.
It's a great opportunity for you to not answer my question. If you are such a great place to work, and I'd like to congratulate you, said you won an award recently on being a great place to work. If you are that great a place to work, why have your workers in Coventry gone on strike so much?
Our employees have the right to join a trade union or not to join a trade union, and we totally respect that.
I'm pulling teeth at this point. Neither of you answered that question so far. I'll ask it once more.
Yeah.
I'll ask it once more and then I'll give up because I don't think I'm going to get an answer. Why have they gone on strike so much? What is the reason behind it? You talk to workers every day, you've told us, and that's what your teams do. So when you ask them, why are you going on strike? What's their answer back to you? Why are they striking?
They were demonstrating their right to support the trade union that they were a member of.
I thought this video was so hilarious because it honestly brought me back to some old workplaces that I've had where employees would bring up an issue with the person in management, and that person would just so diplomatically not answer the question and completely change course. Also online, you will find no shortage of people who straight up willfully misunderstand what a content creator is trying to say.
I don't care if this app goes away anymore. I said, if you can take your shopping cart back and you don't, you're a bad person. And everyone said, well, that's ableist. What if you can't take your shopping cart back? I said, if you are able, but some people aren't able. If you are, I'm gonna get all my hater takes out before January 19th. Some of y'all say media literacy when you just mean reading comprehension. Like, oh my God, the lack of media literacy. That's like digging for the subtext, right? That's digging for the implied meaning. And like subconscious. I don't want to say the word propaganda on this app right now. But if you're talking about someone like misconstruing what someone is physically like saying with the text on the screen in their TikTok, that's not media literacy, babe. That is reading comprehension.
I thought that this TikTok was so true because some people literally don't even watch the video in question before commenting to misconstrue it. And I could give like 10 examples at the top of my head where this has happened to me, where I was trying to communicate something in a video or even in a comment and people were just not even listening to what I was saying or not even engaging with the argument that I had literally put into writing. And honestly, like, I don't think these people are even worth mentioning. I don't want to give them any more power than they tried to get. But I try so hard to account for every possible exception and caveat in my videos, and sometimes I feel like I would get the same exact reaction if I didn't. Because if I say the caveats up front, some people are still going to comment in a way that makes it obvious they haven't even watched 10 seconds into the video. If I say the caveats at the end, most people aren't going to watch till the end, so of course people are still going to comment as if I didn't say them. If I don't give the caveats at all, people are also going to mention it then. And if I do give the caveat at any point in the video, people are also going to get offended about that. For some reason, people online seem to think that every single piece of media they are consuming has to be specifically catered to their situation. And if they're not the target audience or they're not perfectly represented by that type of media, they lash out at the creator of that content. It's low-key narcissism. It's low-key thinking that you are the center of the universe, that the sun revolves around you. Not everything is made for you or with you in mind. Crazy, but it's actually not all about you. And you'll also see this in debates where you can really tell when someone is more interested in confirming their pre-existing beliefs rather than actually getting closer to the truth. You'll notice because they're interrupting a lot, or they're changing the subject a lot, or they're not acknowledging when the other person has a good point, or not engaging with the content of the counter argument that was just presented to them. A really good example of this is I was recently watching Dr. Mike's podcast where he had on a guest called Dr. Gundry, a doctor who has said that like apples are bad for you, smoking is good for you. And it was fascinating to watch how every time Dr. Mike, and also he had another guest on, a really brilliant cardiologist whose name I'm not familiar with because she's not a content creator I've seen before. But both him and that cardiologist guest had like incredibly eloquent points, were bringing up such high quality evidence to Dr. Gundry. And Dr. Gundry's response every time was just to completely ignore what they said and go back to anecdotal evidence, which made these arguments just so incredibly circular and made it impossible to actually get to the bottom of the truth. You cannot get to the bottom of the truth with someone who is determined not to listen to you.
There's no
fruit is not available year-round.
There's no
normally.
research that shows us that fruit has to be eaten in season for it to be healthful. All of the research shows us that in a dose-dependent manner, people who eat more fruit, in the highest tertiles of consumption of fruit, people who eat a varied diet of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and all these things have every marker of lower disease risk, whether it's cardiovascular disease risk, obesity, weight control, diabetes. And so my question to you is besides the seasonality you're discussing with regards to apes, which we are not, when we have all this human outcome data showing us that there is no seasonality to fruit consumption, it's just eating a varied plant-predominant diet that's most healthful. How do you make that leap from animals to when we have all of this human data showing the opposite of what you're saying?
So in the Mediterranean, people do eat fruit seasonally.
People eat fruit year-round in the Mediterranean as well.
Do you not respect the research that Dr. Belardo is pointing out saying that people who eat fruits in the highest amounts have lower risk factors and better outcomes?
Because they're following people primarily in the Mediterranean, and they do.
But that's not true.
No. The NHANES, I'm talking about the major
NHANES,
cohort
yeah,
data in
I
the
know.
United States. That's the Nurses Health Study.
Right.
We're talking about the physicians study. Like all of these cohorts are in the United States. So
We need to start discerning when is somebody not listening to what we have to say. Well, here are a few signs that somebody is not listening to you. There are no signs of active reflective listening. You don't see them actually listening, actually hearing, nodding along, saying, mm-hmm. Their response is shallow or superficial. You know, if you just went into a 10-minute monologue about how much you're struggling and their only response is, oh no, let me know if I can do anything. You know, it's just like it lacks depth. Like out of everything that you just said, they couldn't engage with more than just a very superficial, let me know if there's anything I can do. Or in other situations, their response actually completely disregards what you said, change the subject or divert your attention to something else. Like, so you mentioned you haven't been sleeping well because of what's going on with blah, blah, blah. Oh, that reminds me, I couldn't sleep last night either because Dave was just being so horrible. Or they might go into a word salad that you don't even know where, like what to start responding to because you've completely forgotten what you were even talking about. Or they might shift gear to their agenda or their priorities for the interaction. Another sign that they're not listening is that they're using the broken record method on you. Like those Amazon employees that I showed you earlier in the video. They clearly have a predetermined, established agenda, and they will not stray from it. And if somebody's doing that, it reflects that they have a really rigid boundary that they're refusing to budge on. And sometimes that may be understandable if their boundary is like, hey, I expect you to treat me with basic human decency. But other times, it might not be a reasonable boundary that they're being really rigid on. You know, like you could be presenting just like a mountain of evidence about why you think that somebody should be believed as a victim. But some people who are straight up not listening are not even going to process what you just said and immediately parrot, well, I still don't like her. And another sign is that they just don't actually seem to be empathizing with your situation. They don't seem swayed by whatever genuine emotion you're showing. They don't seem capable of putting themselves in your shoes. And without empathy, they don't really have the capacity to hear you out. They're only thinking about their own argument. They're never imagining what is somebody else thinking and feeling and wanting. Now look, sometimes people gotta just agree to disagree. This is one of those caveats that I'm gonna mention. Sometimes people might hear your explanation, they might hear you out, and they might still disagree with your reasoning or with the argument that you presented. And it's also important for you to be listening to that person. But the distinction is this: in those situations where they still agree to disagree, they heard your argument first, and they interacted with it, and they presented their own counter-argument. They showed capacity for empathy. They were actively, reflectively listening to you. They engaged with the actual content of what you were saying. What they didn't do is just ignore good arguments that you made and just dig their heels deeper into their own. But if you're noticing that someone is straight up not listening to you, you gotta get out of the trap of over-explaining yourself. It will only leave you feeling more frustrated, more unheard, and more exasperated. At that point, you need to protect yourself, conserve your energy, and turn your attention to more productive ways of moving forward. So how do you actually respond in those situations instead of over-explaining yourself? You ignore their attempts at diverting the topic. You bring the discussion back to the topic at hand every time they try a diversion technique. You ask them to paraphrase what you're trying to communicate to them. You're saying like, hey, can you just summarize what I'm trying to say here? Because I feel like you're not really hearing what I'm saying. You point out that this isn't constructive anymore. You just say, okay, maybe we need to agree to disagree, or I'm going to disengage from this conversation now. And you got to become the broken record. You got to outlast them. They think they can be a broken record and not hear any of what you have to say. You got to show that actually, no, you know what, two can play this game. So let me show you a brief skit of how to disengage with someone when you realize that they're straight up not listening. Dad, is this a good time to talk?
Yeah, what's up?
I've been doing a lot of thinking since the last time you stayed with me and Steve when you were in town, and I really think it would be best for everyone involved if in the future you get a hotel room instead of staying with us.
I'm sorry, what? You're banning me from your house?
So already he's approaching this defensively, not from a place of trying to understand or curiosity. That is the first red flag that he's not listening. Not banning you, just asking you to please stay somewhere else. Here I'm clarifying what I'm actually saying that he's already misconstruing by not fully listening.
I don't understand. How could you do this to your own father? I raised you. I put a roof over your head. Is this not the least you can do in return?
Okay, sure, I can tell you my reasons. You made a lot of noise at nighttime watching TV and calling your friends, so the kids were up late and I could barely get them to school the next day. When I asked you to please keep the noise down, that didn't seem to help at all. Also, you said some pretty hurtful things to Steve about his parenting style, which had a negative effect on your relationship with him. And I just think if we each have our own personal space, it would really help to keep our interactions positive and limit scenarios where the relationship might get worse. So here I gave my reasons, of which there were many, and I did so once. I even explained how this is even in Dad's best interest too, not just my own.
Wow. I always knew Steve was a little bitch. Big man complaining to his wife, huh? Truth comes out now. I see him for what he is.
So here he didn't actually hear my very good reasons. He just latched on to one thing that was honestly pretty insulting. Actually, this is a decision that Steve and I made together. He didn't complain to me. We both saw the problem and we discussed it as a team. Because I actually do listen to what other people have to say, I'm interacting with the content of what he said, even though it's a diversion technique meant to distract from his own feelings of shame. But I'm also clarifying that it's not accurate.
Yeah, I don't know how you could do this to your own father. Don't you remember I put a roof over your head? In grade school, I bought you all those things that your mom wouldn't buy you.
Here he's bringing up completely unrelated things, not interacting with my explanation, not empathizing at all with what I mentioned. Like, oh my God, I hurt Steve's feelings. I apologize. It makes me so embarrassed to hear that. Or, oh my God, I woke up your kids. I'm so sorry. I had no idea how loud I was being. No, there's no sign of empathy at all. And now this is where I could really get roped into needing to defend myself, getting distracted from the topic at hand. But instead, I'm going to identify that I'm interacting with someone who's determined not to hear me out, and I'm going to instead hold my ground. I really don't see how that's relevant to the topic at hand. Can you please tell me in your own words what I'm trying to communicate with you? Here I am rejecting the diversion tactic and redirecting to the topic at hand. I'm requesting something that will force the other party to engage with what I said, and if needed, clarify any misinterpretations in what they think I said.
Excuse me? It is relevant, because it shows how ungrateful you are, and that's the issue at hand.
Dad, can you please paraphrase what I said were my reasons for not wanting you to stay with us anymore?
Yeah, Steve's a little bitch.
No, I gave several reasons, including your inconsiderate volume level at nighttime, the effect it has on the kids, your insensitive comments to Steve, the effect it has on our relationship with you, and the fact that things did not get better once I brought up these concerns. Do those reasons not make sense to you? Here I am correcting the cognitive distortion with factual evidence.
Yeah, because it's not true. I only watched TV one night, and Jesus Christ, it wasn't that loud.
Okay, so it doesn't seem like this conversation is very productive. You have your perspective, I have mine. That's fine, but at the end of the day, I just wanted to let you know why you won't be able to stay with us the next time you're in town. Here, I'm acknowledging that we might need to just agree to disagree. I'm not saying your perspective is wrong, and I'm using the broken record technique. The message that I'm ultimately trying to drive home is you're no longer allowed to stay with us when you're in town, not me explaining my reasoning any further.
Hold on just a minute here. It's just your way or the highway? There's no room for negotiation at all?
Unfortunately, for the reasons I just repeated, we've already made our decision. You won't be able to stay with us the next time you're in town. Unfortunately, now I have some things to get done, so I'm going to talk to you another time, Dad. Again, I am reiterating, I'm just a broken record. I am ending the conversation.
All right, cool. Have fun with Steve, the little bitch.
Oh, she's so cute. What?
You made me laugh.
How did I make you laugh?
You're laughing at my burp. Hold up. It's just your way or the highway? There's no negation.
What?
Thank you.
I hope that this video and this skit were helpful to you. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you have your own, like personal experiences with this, that is something that I'd be particularly interested in reading about. And just want to say, if this is something that you're going through, I completely get it. It's extremely frustrating, and I hope that you will feel more empowered when you're no longer playing this game with them. All right, take care.